To Ethan Holmes, she was always the woman. I rarely heard him refer to her by any other description. In his view, she overshadowed and dominated the entirety of her sex. It was not that he felt anything resembling love for Irene Adams. All emotions, and that one above all, were repugnant to his cool, exact, yet perfectly balanced intellect. He was, in my opinion, the most flawless engine of reasoning and observation the world has ever known, but as a romantic partner he would have placed himself at a disadvantage. He never spoke of tender feelings except with sarcasm or mockery. Such passions were admirable for an observer, useful in exposing the motives and actions of others. But for a disciplined analyst to allow such intrusions into his own sensitive and finely tuned temperament was to introduce a disruptive element that could cast doubt on every conclusion he reached. A grain of sand in a precision instrument or a fracture in one of his powerful lenses would not have been more unsettling than intense emotion in a nature like his. And yet there was only one woman to him, and that woman was the late Irene Adams, remembered in a manner both uncertain and controversial. I had seen little of Holmes in recent times. My marriage had gradually drawn us apart. My own complete contentment, along with the domestic concerns that surround a man who has just established his own household, were enough to claim all my attention, while Holmes, who despised every form of social life with his fiercely independent spirit, remained in our old apartment on Bleecker Street, immersed in his aging books, shifting from week to week between chemical stimulants and ambition, between the lethargy of substances and the fierce intensity of his sharp mind. As always, he remained deeply absorbed in the study of crime, applying his immense abilities and extraordinary powers of observation to tracing clues and unraveling mysteries that official law enforcement had abandoned as unsolvable. From time to time, I heard vague reports of his activities, of his summons to Chicago in the matter of a high-profile political murder, of his resolution of the unusual tragedy involving the Atkinson brothers in coastal California, and finally of the delicate and successful mission he had completed for a powerful American political family. Beyond these public signs of his work, which I learned only as any newspaper reader might, I knew little of my former friend and companion. One evening, it was the 20th of March, 2018, I was returning from a visit to a patient, having resumed private medical practice, when my route led me through Bleecker Street. As I passed the familiar doorway, forever associated in my memory with my courtship and with the dark events of A Study in Crimson, I felt a sudden and powerful desire to see Holmes again and learn how he was using his remarkable talents. His windows were brightly illuminated, and as I looked up, I saw his tall, lean figure pass twice in dark outline across the window shade. He was moving rapidly back and forth, eagerly, his head bent forward and his hands clasped behind his back. To me, who knew his habits and moods intimately, his posture and movement spoke clearly enough. He was engaged once more. He had emerged from his chemically induced reveries and was fully engaged in the pursuit of a new problem. I rang the bell and was led upstairs to the room that had once been partly my own. His greeting was not demonstrative, it seldom was, yet I believe he was pleased to see me. Without more than a word, but with a friendly glance, he motioned me toward an armchair, tossed me his case of cigars, and gestured toward a decanter and soda siphon in the corner. Then he stood before the fireplace and examined me in his characteristic, quietly analytical manner. One evening, it was March 20th, 2025, I was returning from visiting a patient, as I had resumed private practice, when my route took me past my old neighborhood on Madison Street. As I walked by the familiar door, forever linked in my mind with my early days in medicine and the dark events of the Scarlet case, a strong desire seized me to see Alex Holmes again and observe how he was applying his remarkable talents. His apartment was brightly lit, and as I glanced upward, I saw his tall, lean figure pass twice in shadow against the blinds. He was pacing quickly, intently, with his head bowed and his hands clasped behind him. To me, who knew every habit and nuance of his character, his posture told its own story. He was back at work, rising from his stimulant-induced haze, fully engaged in some new investigation. I rang the bell and was shown up into the study, which had once partly been my own. His demeanor was restrained, as always, yet I think he was glad to see me. With barely a word, but with a welcoming glance, he gestured toward an armchair, tossed me his cigar case, and pointed out a small bar and soda siphon in the corner. Then he stood near the fireplace, scrutinizing me with his typical introspective gaze. "Marriage suits you," he remarked. "I estimate, Watson, you've gained about 7.5 pounds since we last met." "7?" I said. "Indeed, I might have guessed slightly more. Just a touch, I imagine, Watson, and back to practice, I see. You didn't tell me you planned to resume work." "How do you know?" I asked. "I observe and deduce. For instance, I can tell you were caught in the rain recently and that your assistant is careless and clumsy." "My dear Holmes," I said, "this is incredible. You would have been branded a witch finder centuries ago. True, I had a long walk in the storm last Thursday and arrived in a mess, but I changed my clothes, and I cannot fathom how you deduce that. As for Sarah, she is hopeless, and my wife has given her notice. Yet again, I fail to see your reasoning." He chuckled, rubbing his long, nervous hands together. "It is simple," he said. "My eyes noticed 6 nearly parallel scuffs on the inside of your left shoe where the firelight strikes, clearly caused by someone scraping the edges to remove hardened mud. Hence, I can deduce you're out in foul weather and that your assistant is a particularly careless soul. Regarding your practice, a visitor entering my study, smelling faintly of antiseptic, with a black mark of silver nitrate on his right forefinger and a bulge in his hat for a concealed stethoscope, cannot fail to be a physician. I would be dull indeed if I failed to reach that conclusion." I laughed at his effortless explanation. "Hearing your reasoning," I said, "it always seems ridiculously simple, though each time I try, I'm baffled until you explain. And yet I trust my eyes as much as yours." "Precisely," he said, lighting a cigarette and sinking into an armchair. "You see, but you do not observe. The distinction is crucial. For example, consider the steps leading from the hall to this room." "Frequently," I said. "How many?" "I don't know." "Exactly. You've seen, but not observed. I know there are 17 steps, for I have both seen and observed. Now, since you are interested in these little puzzles, and as you kindly chronicle some of my minor experiences, you may find this intriguing." He tossed a thick, slightly pink sheet of stationery across the table. "It arrived with the last mail," he said. "Read it aloud." The note was undated, with no signature or return address. "There will call upon you tonight at 7:45 a gentleman seeking counsel on a matter of the utmost importance. Your recent assistance to a prominent American family has proven you trustworthy with delicate matters of great significance. This information about you comes from multiple reliable sources. Be in your study at that hour, and do not be surprised if your visitor wears a mask." "This is certainly mysterious," I said. "What do you make of it?" "I have no facts yet. It is foolish to theorize without them. One may distort facts to fit a theory rather than fitting the theory to the facts. But the note itself, what do you deduce? I examined the handwriting and the paper carefully. The author appears well-to-do, I ventured, emulating Holmes's method. Such stationery wouldn't cost less than $5 per ream. It's unusually stiff and durable. Peculiar, that's the word, said Holmes. It is not American-made paper. Hold it to the light. I did so and noticed a subtle watermark, the letters ACPCONJ woven into the sheet. What do you make of that? Asked Holmes. Presumably the manufacturer's mark, I suggested. Exactly. The letters indicate Atlantic Coast Paper Company, New Jersey. We know, therefore, that the note originated from there. Observe the phrasing. This information about you comes from multiple reliable sources. A non-native speaker would not construct it this way. This tells me the writer is precise and formal in English. All that remains is to discover the intentions of this masked visitor, and here he comes, I expect, to clarify everything. As he spoke, the sharp sound of car wheels on asphalt, followed by a firm knock at the door, interrupted us. Holmes whistled. By the sound, a luxury sedan, he said, peering through the window. Yes, and a fine pair of horses under the hood ornament. Plenty of money behind this case, Watson, if nothing else. I should leave, Holmes, I said. Not at all, Doctor. Stay. I need my Boswell. This promises to be fascinating. It would be a shame to miss it. But the client, never mind him. I may need your assistance, and he may as well. Here he comes. Sit, Doctor, and observe closely. A slow, heavy step paused just outside the door, followed by a firm, commanding knock. Come in, Holmes said. A man entered, standing easily 6'6", with a broad, powerful build. His attire was richly extravagant, bordering on gaudy. A deep blue overcoat lined with crimson silk, heavy fur-trimmed boots, and a wide-brimmed hat in hand. A black mask covered the upper part of his face, leaving visible a firm jaw and resolute lips, indicating a man of strong will and character. You received my note, he asked in a deep, commanding voice with a slight European accent. I said I would call. He glanced between us, unsure whom to address first. Please sit, said Holmes. This is my colleague, Dr. Watson, who occasionally assists me. Whom am I addressing? Call me Count Kramer, an American noble of New Jersey. I understand this gentleman is trustworthy and discreet, suitable for sensitive matters. Otherwise, I would prefer a private discussion. I rose, but Holmes gripped my wrist, pushing me back into the chair. Both or none, he said. Speak freely before him as you would before me. The Count shrugged. Then I must begin by binding you both to strict secrecy for 2 years. After that, the matter will hold no importance. For now, it carries weight sufficient to affect significant American families. I promise, Holmes said. And I added. Excuse the mask, continued the visitor. The person who employs me wishes to remain unknown, and the title I gave is not exactly my own. I suspected as much, Holmes said dryly. It is a delicate situation. Every precaution is necessary to prevent scandal. To speak plainly, it concerns the prominent house of Armstrong, a family of considerable influence. I am aware, murmured Holmes, reclining in his chair. Our visitor studied the relaxed figure of Holmes, who had been depicted to him as the sharpest mind in the country. Holmes reopened his eyes, looking at the enormous man before him. If you would state your case, Your Excellency, I can advise more effectively. The man leapt up, pacing with agitation. With a desperate gesture, he tore the mask from his face. You are right, he declared. I am the head of the Armstrong family. Why hide it? Indeed, murmured Holmes, I had not realized until now that I was speaking to Edward Armstrong, patriarch of the Armstrong dynasty. But you understand, the visitor said, sitting and pressing his hand to his forehead, I am not accustomed to handling such matters personally, yet this situation is so delicate I cannot delegate it without risk. I came incognito from New Jersey to consult you." "Then consult," Holmes said, closing his eyes briefly. "The facts are as follows. About 5 years ago, while visiting Boston, I met the well-known socialite Irene Adams. Surely you know the name." "Check my index, Doctor," murmured Holmes. For years he had catalogued all notes concerning people and events. In this case, her biography was lodged between that of a community leader and a naval officer who studied deep-sea life. "Let me see," Holmes said. "Born in New Jersey in 1985, contralto, Boston Opera, yes, retired from—" The next morning, Holmes and I met in his study promptly at 3 o'clock. He was already examining his papers, cigarette smoke curling lazily toward the ceiling. "This is going to be interesting, Watson," he said. "Irene Adams is no ordinary adversary. She possesses extraordinary intelligence and cunning. We must be precise." I asked, "How do you intend to track her, Holmes?" He tapped his long fingers together. "Observation, deduction, and a touch of theatricality. First, we must locate her residence in Manhattan. The address given by Count Kramer, 123 Bryony Lane, places her in a stylish brownstone in St. John's Wood district, not a poor neighborhood, but far from ostentatious, perfect for someone wishing to live quietly while maintaining influence and privacy." We took a taxi, and within the hour we were in front of the brownstone. Holmes observed every detail: the mailboxes, the footprints in the mud, the slight scuff marks on the steps. "Notice the direction of the footprints," he murmured. "She is careful, but even the most careful leave a trace. And see here," he added, pointing to a faint smudge on the gate latch. "Someone has recently entered. She is home." We circled the building, noting the guards and the layout of the street. Holmes was meticulous, cataloging every window, door, and possible entrance. "Preparation is everything," he said. "We must anticipate her every move before we act." After a few hours of observation, a woman appeared at the window, her hair a striking shade of auburn, her expression confident and measured. Holmes leaned back. "Watson, there she is, Irene Adams. Observe her posture, the way she scans the street, careful, deliberate, and intelligent. Nothing about her is accidental." We returned to Holmes' study, where he immediately began planning. The photograph is hidden inside her home, no doubt under careful protection, but she underestimates one thing: the subtleties of human behavior are always observable. Our task is not to break in, but to outthink her. Holmes devised a plan. "We shall create a distraction to lure her out, a false message, a staged event, something to draw her attention. Once she is out, we gain entry and retrieve the photograph. Timing is everything. Precision is paramount." 2 days later, we implemented our plan. A delivery was staged, a small, seemingly ordinary parcel delivered to her brownstone. She approached it cautiously, checking the street, her instincts alert. Holmes and I watched from a concealed position, noting every movement. As she leaned to retrieve the package, Holmes whispered, "Now, Watson, observe how her mind works. Every hesitation, every glance reveals her thought process. She is clever, but not infallible." Irene Adams retrieved the package and opened it carefully. Inside was a note indicating a social invitation, perfectly crafted to pique her curiosity. She smiled faintly, unaware of the attention she was under. Holmes grinned. "We are in the final stage, Watson. The trap is set. She will return home with the photograph, believing all is as usual. That is our moment." That evening, Holmes and I approached the brownstone. The street was quiet, and the lights in her windows indicated she was alone. Holmes gestured to a side alley, and we made our way to a vantage point overlooking the entrance. "Patience," he said. "Observe, do not rush. She will reveal her plan without realizing it." Soon Irene emerged briefly, carrying the photograph under her arm. She paused, looked around, and locked the door behind her. Holmes and I followed discreetly, keeping to the shadows. Every step, every movement was noted. "Notice how she cradles it. She trusts no one. She is cautious but predictable under stress." When she entered a small carriage waiting nearby, we maintained a safe distance, observing her route through the streets of Manhattan. Holmes had memorized every turn and alley. He instructed, "We must remain close, but not so close as to alarm her." Finally, at a discreet intersection, Holmes acted. Using a clever ruse, a staged minor collision involving a cab, he diverted her attention momentarily. While she attended to the distraction, Holmes swiftly retrieved the photograph from her carriage. Within moments, the carriage drove off, unaware of the theft. Returning to his study, Holmes examined the photograph carefully. "Safe, Watson. The Count will be pleased. But notice she left no personal mark. Clever indeed. One must respect such intelligence." I asked, "Will she know who took it?" Holmes shook his head. "She may guess, but evidence points nowhere. The beauty of observation and deduction, Watson, is that the act is invisible to all but the most perceptive, and even Irene Adams, for all her genius, cannot detect our precise movements." That evening, Holmes dispatched a letter to Count Edward Armstrong, returning the photograph securely. Within days, the engagement was announced and peace restored. As I watched Holmes settle into his armchair, lighting a cigarette with his usual ease, he remarked, "Watson, the cleverest adversaries provide the most satisfying victories. Never underestimate human ingenuity, but never forget that careful observation and reason can overcome it." And so ended the case of Irene Adams, the woman who, in Holmes' eyes, remained forever unique, unforgettable, and unmatched.